Have you ever been next to someone and, without any logical explanation, felt your chest tighten, your breathing become heavy, as if that person's very presence drained something essential from within you? They didn't shout, they didn't attack, they didn't act in an overt way. And yet, you left that conversation feeling tired, restless, perhaps even doubting yourself. It's as if a dense silence had been louder than 1,000 words. Carl Jung, the father of analytical psychology, not only recognized this phenomenon but gave it a name. And the most dangerous sign that this is happening is not what the person does, but what they take from you without you realizing it: your peace. The human mind is a sanctuary, but it is also a battlefield. Within us, there are unresolved conflicts, unintegrated shadows, and ununderstood traumas. And when these unconscious contents are not confronted, they do not disappear. They are projected. And that's where the danger begins. When someone refuses to look at their internal wounds, they start to see these wounds in others. Without realizing it, they turn the other person into a distorted mirror of themselves. And you can be that mirror. Imagine you're talking to someone, and suddenly that person starts insinuating that you're manipulative, selfish, insensitive, without you giving any sign of it. At first, you defend yourself, try to argue, show that it's not like that. But the tension continues. Something invisible hangs in the air. And deep down, even though you know it's not your fault, you ask yourself, am I really all that they're saying? That's the exact moment when your energy starts to drain. Carl Jung called this shadow projection. A subtle, silent, but devastating mechanism. The person who projects isn't interacting with you. They're fighting with rejected parts of themselves, using you as a battlefield. And if you don't realize it in time, you end up absorbing an emotional burden that never belonged to you. It's as if someone opened your mind and planted an invisible virus in it, programmed to slowly erode your self-esteem. But there is good news. When you understand this mechanism, it loses its power to hurt you. When you see the invisible, it stops being a trap and becomes a warning. In this video, we will explore the most subtle, but most dangerous, signs that someone is silently draining your peace. We will unmask the psychic mechanisms that operate behind seemingly harmless behaviors. And most importantly, we will reveal how to identify these patterns, how to protect yourself, and how to transform this knowledge into a shield. Jung said that he preferred to be complete rather than good. And perhaps the biggest mistake we make is trying to maintain external harmony by sacrificing our internal truth. The time has come to change that, to recognize that there are people who, even if unconsciously, drain our energy because they do not know how to deal with their own, and that there are ways to interrupt this cycle with awareness, presence, and discernment. Get ready to enter the invisible backstage of the human mind. What you will discover next can transform not only your relationships, but your own relationship with silence, intuition, and peace that no one else has the right to steal. Imagine someone who has built a nice persona. This person sees themselves as altruistic, understanding, spiritual. But somewhere inside them, there is anger, envy, vanity, human elements that they do not accept. When they see someone expressing these emotions authentically, they feel uncomfortable. Not because the other person is wrong, but because they are mirroring something they have repressed. So they react, they criticize, they distance themselves, they play the victim. And the other person often does not understand what they did wrong. They were just being honest, and that was too much for the other persona. These dynamics are common, and the more sensitive and empathetic you are, the more likely you are to attract people who project, because sensitivity is fertile ground for subtle manipulation. Those who project look for someone who will listen, who will absorb, who will welcome, and you, wanting to help, end up becoming the target. Not because of weakness, but because of a lack of awareness. You are not being stupid, you are being human. The problem begins when this humanity is exploited, when your compassion becomes a gateway to someone else's imbalance, when your empathy becomes a trap. And that's why this video exists, to turn on the lights, to name the invisible, to give you back the right to notice when something isn't right, even if it seems normal. You don't need to justify walking away from someone who disturbs your peace. There won't always be concrete evidence. There won't always be shouting or insults. Sometimes the attack comes in the form of silence, presence, looks, veiled judgments. And your body knows it. Your soul feels it. Your intuition screams. What's missing is the permission to trust all of this. Our next step will be to dive deeper, to understand how to recognize the specific signs that someone is draining your peace, even when everything seems calm on the surface, and what to do when someone else's shadow tries to settle inside you. Now that you understand what the shadow is and how it operates in human relationships through projection, we need to go a step further. Recognize the signs, because the danger of psychic draining lies precisely in its subtlety. There are no outbursts. There is no scandal, just a slow erosion of your life force. The first sign, and perhaps the most telling, is confusion. A confusion that arises not from complex arguments or real dilemmas, but from simple conversations that end with you doubting yourself. You share something personal, and the other person responds with a comment that seems innocent, but makes you question your own intentions. Something like, "Are you sure you're not being a little dramatic about that?" Or, "Maybe it's all in your head." Phrases like these don't sound aggressive, but they leave an invisible wound, a crack in your self-confidence. These little verbal stings are the shadow's most common way of manifesting itself. They are words disguised as concern but loaded with judgment, and when you try to explain how you feel, you realize that the other person has already decided who you are. And that's scary, because you start to realize that, with them, there's no room for you to be whole. You need to adapt. Tread lightly. Be less. And when being less becomes a habit, you start to disappear into yourself. Another symptom is the inexplicable fatigue after contact. You didn't run a marathon. You didn't solve a serious problem. You just met that person, and you left exhausted. This fatigue is energetic. It's the body reacting to an unequal exchange, where you gave more than you received. It's as if, behind every conversation, there was a leak. And this leak isn't of words or ideas. It's of the soul. Jung said that everything that doesn't reach consciousness returns as destiny. And when we ignore these signs, we repeat the same patterns. We get involved with similar people. We recreate the same story with new faces. And we start to think that the problem is in us, because we are always the ones who end up tired, frustrated, drained. But the truth is different. The problem lies in the lack of discernment, in the ignorance of the invisible mechanisms that govern human relationships. Because when you know what's going on, something changes. You begin to see more clearly. You begin to feel more accurately. You begin to decide more firmly. And that is power. The shadow, when not recognized, infiltrates. And it often comes disguised as virtue. Yes, virtue. One of the most dangerous disguises of emotional draining is exaggerated kindness. People who never make mistakes, who are always available, who say yes to everything, but who deep down carry resentment. They offer support, but expect obedience. They help, but demand silent loyalty. And when you don't reciprocate in the way expected, they coldly withdraw or make passive-aggressive comments. This type of energy is corrosive, because it creates the illusion that you are indebted to someone who, in fact, is manipulating you through kindness. And the trap closes when you start to feel guilty for not wanting to be around them, as if you were ungrateful, cold, selfish. But the truth is simple. You are just trying to breathe. And here comes another fundamental concept of psychic inflation. When someone identifies too much with an idea of superiority, be it moral, spiritual, or intellectual, they begin to see themselves as above error, above doubt, above pain. And because it is so inflated, it loses the ability to see the other person with real empathy. The inflated person does not listen, teaches, does not welcome, corrects, does not feel, analyzes. And when you interact with this person, you feel small, inferior, as if you were always in debt, always needing to improve, always falling short. Ego inflation is often confused with confidence, but they are opposites. True confidence is silent, receptive, humble. Inflation is loud, even if disguised as subtlety. It expresses itself in condescending looks, in phrases like, "You will understand when you evolve more," or "I have been where you are." Phrases that create an abyss between you. And in this abyss, your energy drains. Have you ever noticed that some people seem to feed on conflict? Not the explicit conflict, but the latent one, where there is always unresolved tension. These are people who feed on the discomfort, doubt, and insecurity of others. Because by keeping you unstable, they feel in control. This is another form of draining, when the other feeds on your imbalance to sustain an illusion of power. Jung invites us to wholeness, and being whole is realizing when something is not yours. when the weight you carry came from another soul, when the sadness you feel was planted by words that were not born of truth, but of the shadow of the one who spoke them. Being whole is refusing to absorb what does not belong to you, even if it means distancing yourself from the one you love. At this point, you may be remembering someone, a recurring presence, a face that smiles but drains you, a voice that seems sweet but makes you doubt yourself, a gesture that seems caring but imprisons you. And if this is coming to the surface, do not ignore it. Your unconscious is warning you. In the next part of this journey, we will understand how to break these cycles of draining, how to accurately identify the mechanisms behind the confusion, and most importantly, how to shield yourself, restore your energy, and set boundaries without losing empathy. Because knowing what is happening is half the battle. The other half is knowing what to do about it. One of the greatest illusions we carry, and that makes us vulnerable to this type of drain, is the idea that human relationships must be preserved at all costs. From an early age, we learn to be kind, to avoid confrontation, to maintain external peace, even if it costs us internal peace. But Jung reminds us that everything that is not faced becomes destiny. When we ignore the patterns of emotional drain, they do not disappear. They repeat themselves. And with each repetition, they gain strength. But what do you do when the person draining your peace is someone you love deeply? A sibling, a partner, a longtime friend? Breaking up seems radical. Confronting seems cruel. Silencing seems cowardly. And it is in this impasse that many become paralyzed, slowly becoming ill within bonds that have become cages. Before you decide to walk away or confront, the first step is to name what's happening. Give form to the invisible. Write it down. Reflect. Ask yourself, what do I feel after being with this person? Do I need to hide parts of myself to maintain this bond? Do I feel freer or more trapped after each encounter? These questions don't require quick answers. They require honesty. And honesty with yourself is the beginning of all healing. Jung called this process individuation, the path to becoming who you really are, free from the masks, projections, and psychic bonds imposed by others. And individuation is, above all, a process of separation. Separating what is yours from what belongs to others. Separating your light from the shadow of others. Separating truth from conditioned affection. There is a symbolic scene that can illustrate this. Imagine that you are carrying a lit lantern, and someone next to you, unconsciously, projects their shadow onto you. This shadow is not yours, but because you have light, it projects onto your body. Now, imagine spending your life trying to erase this shadow, trying to justify, understand, fix, all in vain. Because the problem is not with you. It is with the person who refuses to see what they have projected. This is the difference between empathy and self-sacrifice. Empathy is feeling with the other person, without losing yourself. Self-sacrifice is giving up your own peace to maintain the illusion of harmony. And this illusion, sooner or later, exacts a high price. Anxiety, insomnia, creative blocks, lack of energy, psychosomatic illnesses. The body speaks what the soul tries to silence. In many cases, the draining of peace does not come from words, but from climates. Environments where you feel like you can't take a deep breath, where the air seems dense, where silence is charged with unspoken expectations. In these atmospheres, the simple fact of existing already seems offensive, and you shrink, you adapt, you disconnect. But here's the key. That which makes you shrink does not belong to you. Your essence was made to expand, to breathe, to move freely within your own inner space. And any bond that requires the silent mutilation of your soul is not love. It is attachment. It is imprisonment. It is reciprocal projection, where both are trying to find in the other what they refuse to find in themselves. Jung was clear when he stated that no one becomes enlightened by imagining figures of light, but rather by becoming conscious of the inner darkness. And this applies as much to us as to others. Expecting someone to change without seeing your own shadow is like expecting a tree to blossom in arid soil. It doesn't blossom. It doesn't grow. It just repeats itself. If you constantly feel drained by someone, it's not a lack of love. It's an excess of tolerance. A tolerance that has gone beyond respect and has become self-denial. And when denial is constant, it doesn't just drain, it fragments. You start to act one way with that person, to think another way away from them, and to forget who you really are. This mismatch is fertile ground for emotional illness. But there is a way out of this. Not with anger, not with accusations, but with lucidity, with presence, with awareness. When you look clearly at the hidden mechanisms of a relationship, something magical happens. The illusion is dispelled. The spell is broken. The spell dissolves. And in place of confusion, a serene truth is born. I am not responsible for the shadow that the other refuses to see. This doesn't mean abandoning or cutting ties impulsively. It means changing your internal posture. Stop absorbing what is not yours. Stop justifying the unjustifiable. Stop sabotaging yourself in the name of a peace that was never true. And when you do this, something changes in your vibration. The other person feels it, and there are only two paths. Either they start to see it, or they walk away. But in both cases, you are free. Freedom from psychic draining does not come from fighting. It comes from the silent recognition of what is real. It comes from firm limits, from clear words, from assertive gestures, and above all, from the decision to never abandon yourself again. Perhaps, at this moment, you are remembering specific situations, old relationships, conversations marked by discomfort, moments when you swallowed the pain to maintain the connection. And that's okay. This is part of awakening. Don't blame yourself. You did what you knew how to do with the level of consciousness you had. But now, you know more. And what you do with this knowledge is what will determine the next chapters of your story. The mind, once awakened, does not go back to sleep. And the shadow, once illuminated, no longer has power over you. In the next step, we will transform this knowledge into practice. How to protect your peace, how to establish energetic boundaries, and how to use Jung's wisdom to become whole. Even in a world full of fragmentation, now that you clearly see the signs, mechanisms, and dynamics that silently drain your peace, it is time for something even more powerful: action. Awareness is the first step, but transformation requires practice. Because the world does not change only when you understand what is wrong. It changes when you decide to no longer participate in what weakens you. The first practice is simple, but profound: inner silence. We are so used to reacting, justifying, explaining, defending, that we forget the power of silence. When you sense that something is wrong in a conversation, in an exchange, in an atmosphere, there is no need to rush to give answers. Just breathe. Don't react. Feel. Silence protects you, gives you time, and restores your center. Jung said that the unconscious manifests itself through symbols and feelings, not through arguments. So, when you feel discomfort, before questioning whether you are exaggerating, listen to what your soul is trying to say in the silence. The second practice is conscious mirroring. Often, the person who drains our energy pushes us to internal places that we avoid. They activate triggers that make us feel insecure, angry, or guilty. And then, without realizing it, we react in a childish or explosive way, and we regret it later. Conscious mirroring consists of observing, after each stressful encounter, what was touched within you. What part of you felt threatened? What memory was awakened? When you bring this to the light of consciousness, the other person no longer has power over you, because what was a reaction becomes a revelation. And where there was darkness, there is now clarity. But observing is not enough. You have to act. And this is where the third practice comes in: the energetic limit. Unlike the verbal limit, which can be said, the energetic limit is vibrational. It is an internal decision. I no longer accept diminishing myself to maintain this relationship. This decision changes your posture, your frequency, your body language, and the other person feels it. They may not understand it rationally, but something changes in the dynamics. And this type of limit is the most powerful, because it comes from the soul. It doesn't need shouting. It doesn't need justifications. It just exists, and reorganizes the space around it. You can also establish energy cleansing rituals. I'm not talking about complex, esoteric rituals here, but rather small gestures with a great symbolic effect. A conscious shower when you get home, visualizing the water washing away everything that isn't yours. A deep breath at the end of a difficult encounter, imagining your energy returning to the center of your body. Light a candle. Write down what you felt and then tear it up. Symbolizing is healing. The unconscious responds to the symbolic. Use this to your advantage. And when you feel that it's too difficult to protect yourself, remember, you're not alone. The collective consciousness is awakening. Thousands of people are, like you, recognizing old patterns, breaking cycles, reclaiming their energy. You are part of this. And you don't have to become cold or distant to protect yourself. You can be whole. You can be sensitive and firm at the same time, loving and clear, compassionate and aware. This is the alchemy of emotional maturity. One of the most transformative practices is self-acceptance. After realizing that you've been in a draining relationship, don't feel guilty. Feel compassion. Say to yourself, now I know. Now I see. And because of that, I can choose differently. Touch your own heart with gentleness. Breathe with presence. Healing doesn't happen when we eliminate everything that hurt us. It happens when we become able to accept ourselves after the hurt. Self-validation is also an antidote to subtle manipulation. When someone tries to convince you that you're overreacting, being too sensitive, or seeing things, ask yourself, but what did I feel? Not what they told me. What did I really feel? The body doesn't lie. The soul doesn't lie. And your peace doesn't need anyone's approval to be. If possible, start surrounding yourself with people who nurture you. Relationships where you can be yourself. Where there are no games, no masks, no hidden demands. Where the presence of the other person does not require effort, but offers rest. These relationships exist, and you deserve to experience them. And finally, perhaps most importantly, transform pain into wisdom. All the experiences that hurt you also trained you. Now you see what you didn't see before. You feel what you ignored before. You choose more consciously. The peace you desire begins the moment you say, enough, with love. Love for yourself. Love for your light. Love for your soul that, even though it has been wounded so many times, keeps trying. And now, finally, wakes up. Now that the veil has been lifted, that the invisible mechanisms have been revealed, there remains a silent question echoing within you. And now, what do I do with all this that I know? The answer is simpler than it seems, but it requires courage. Because knowing is only the first step. The real leap forward happens when you decide to live from this new level of consciousness. Carl Jung didn't leave us an instruction manual. He left us a mirror. And in that mirror, we see not only what we are, but also everything we refuse to see. When you recognize that someone is draining your peace, you are not being weak or dramatic. You are being awakened. You are looking at the cracks in a structure that may have always been unstable. Only now you see it clearly. And when you see it, there is no way to unsee it. There is no longer any way to ignore that uncomfortable conversation that left you feeling grounded. That bond that seems to drain your strength. That strange feeling of losing yourself just to maintain the appearance of a balanced relationship. You now know that it has a name, it has structure, it has roots, and that you are not alone. Self-knowledge is not a path that leads to isolation. On the contrary, it connects us with life in a more honest way. Because when we stop accepting what hurts us in silence, we make room for relationships that nourish us out loud. Relationships where we don't have to be less. Where there is no manipulation hidden behind compliments. Where affection does not come with disguised demands. You have the right to choose peace. Not a superficial peace, maintained by the fear of displeasing, but an authentic peace, built with firm limits and self-respect. And to do this, you need to let go. Let go of the role of savior. Let go of the habit of explaining yourself too much. Let go of the need to be understood by those who refuse to look at themselves. Throughout this video, we delve deep into Jung's ideas to understand what it really means to have your peace silently drained. We talk about shadow projection, ego inflation, the persona, and energetically heavy environments. But above all, we talk about your power. The power to perceive, the power to name, the power to say no. The shadow of the other only finds a home when there is open space within you. And now that you are more whole, more lucid, more present, this space closes. And where before there was draining, now there is discernment. Where there was confusion, now there is clarity. And where there was emotional submission, now freedom is born. So, take a deep breath, place your hand on your chest, and say to yourself, firmly and tenderly, I choose my peace. Even if it means disappointing other people's expectations, even if it requires silence, even if it hurts. Because this pain is temporary, but the peace that will come will be eternal. If this video spoke to a part of you that has been trying to be heard for a long time, then stay with us. Subscribe to the channel to receive more reflections like this. Deep, honest, transformative, and share in the comments. Have you ever experienced something like this? How did you recognize it? And how did you react? Your story may light someone else's path. Because in the end, this is true alchemy, transforming pain into awareness, and awareness into freedom.